Mogul Motivation, educating and empowering entrepreneurs 1 week at a time. Presented by True Stories Media. And I am your host, Antoine Twiz Taylor. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Mogul Motivation. Welcome back. I'm happy that you are here. If this is your first time listening, this podcast is for the aspiring entrepreneur who is trying to get over that hump and make things happen. This podcast is for anybody with a dream that wants to aspire higher and accomplish that dream. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and more. Last week, we talked about motivation creation, about how even when you can't find motivation from anyone else, you have to find it within yourself. You have to create it within yourself if you truly want to get it out the mud. If you truly want to get out of this dire situation that you are in, you have to create it for yourself when all else fails. And the beautiful thing about creating your own motivation is it's within you. So you literally control how much or how little you have. Whereas when you base your motivational journey off of other wealthy individuals or successful individuals, or you're basing it off of words of affirmation from other people, you can burn out because that's not going to be unlimited. You can't control the amount of motivation you get from those things, but you can control the amount of motivation within you. Motivation creation is what we talked about on last week's episode. This week's episode, we're going to go a little deeper, 6 feet deep at least. Imagine if someone dug a grave for you. They dug this grave 6 feet deep, maybe deeper, and they threw you into that grave. Now you still have the ability in your limbs, your hands, your feet to climb out of this grave. But as you're climbing out of this grave, they're still dumping dirt into that grave. Sounds like a very unfortunate situation, doesn't it? But that's exactly what racism, that's exactly what capitalism has done to black people and to poor people. Because just because you're white, yes, you may have white privilege, but just because you're white, if you are not born with means, if you are not born into a rich family, then this country doesn't care about you much either. You see, America is a racist country without a doubt. We know that. But it's also a capitalistic country. It's an elitist country. Capitalism is all about caste. It's all about tiers. So if you're not in the elite, the wealthy class, they don't really care about you much. And they really don't care about you if you're black. So this is what racism and capitalism has done. It has dug the graves for millions of people throughout history. And it threw them in those graves as babies. And slowly but surely, they're dumping dirt into that grave until you're buried. Now, see, the psychological effects of racism, the psychological effects of capitalism, it erodes your mind and it makes you believe that since you've been in this grave for as long as you can remember, it makes you believe that you're supposed to belong in that grave. It makes you believe that this is your life to be in that grave while they're dumping dirt on top of you. And the sad reality is a lot of us accept this. We accept this matrix. We believe that we're supposed to be dirt. We believe we're supposed to be living amongst dirt. We believe this is what life is supposed to be because this is how mama and daddy live. This is how our grandparents live. So this is how I'm supposed to live. Racism and capitalism dug the grave for us. And slowly but surely is dumping dirt on top of us to bury us. But we still have the ability in our hands and our feet to climb out of it. That's what's most tragic about this analogy. Even though you're in the grave, even though you believe you're supposed to be in the grave, and even though they're still dumping dirt on you in this grave, you still have the ability to get out of that grave. But we don't believe that. But you do. You have the ability to climb out. Once you realize that, and a lot of people don't realize it, but you know what? If you're listening to this podcast, I feel like you realized it because that's why you started your business. Because that's why you're going about what you're doing in your career, chasing your goals. If you're listening to Mogul Motivation, it's because you are one of the blessed few that believes that you can get out that grave, that believes and knows the truth that this grave is not where you're supposed to be for all your life. So you still have the ability in your hands and your feet to climb out of it, despite the fact they're still throwing dirt on you. You can still get out of this grave. Once you understand that when you started this business, when you started going on this entrepreneurial journey and chasing your goals, it's bigger than you. You have a duty, not just to yourself, but to your children, to your future children, to the people who love you, to the people who believe in you, to get out of that grave. You have a responsibility to get out of that grave. So whatever you're doing right now in your business, in your journey, wherever you're at, you have to keep going. I know it's hard. I know life sucks. I know it's unfair. I know racism and capitalism continues to beat you down with brainwashing and all of this false rhetoric to make you doubt yourself and lose confidence. I know this is a reality because I battle it too as a black man in America, as an entrepreneur in America. I battle these things too. I know all of this to be true. But you have to keep going. You have to continue to create that motivation deep inside you so you can climb out of this grave. So you can accumulate better resources, more money, better credit, and wealth, not just for yourself, but for others. You know, I was listening to a podcast, one of my favorite podcasts, and the host said, they're black men, the host said that they created a trust fund that won't mature until 90 years from now. And understand, these men are in their 40s, their 50s. They're going to be dead by the time this trust fund matures. But guess what? They did it not for themselves. They did it for their children and for their future grandchildren to benefit off of that trust fund. 90 years? We're talking about grandchildren, great-grandchildren at that point. That's who's going to benefit from this trust fund that they created. Black men did this. And understand, in order to get to that point, they had to climb out of the graves that they were born into. They had to climb out those graves, ladies and gentlemen. They had to work hard to get somewhere, to get to a better place in life than what they were born into so they can lay that foundation for somebody else. It's imperative that you keep going. It's imperative that you find that motivation deep inside you. It's important. It's necessary that you do not stop working. You do not stop clawing. You do not stop climbing to get out of that grave. Because see, once you're out that grave, the work ain't over. Once you get a successful business, once you become a millionaire, once you become successful in whatever career that you're in, it ain't over. Because guess what? Now you got to go to another grave and now you got to help them get out of there. That's why it's so important, because somebody got to climb out their grave. Somebody got to be dirty. Somebody got to get bruised. Somebody got to get battered to get out of their grave so you can help others get out of theirs. That's the point of all of this. When you became an entrepreneur, when you started to chase your dreams, it wasn't for selfish reasons. And if it was, then this podcast ain't for you, because we don't talk about selfish living over here. It's all about uplift. You started this business. You started on this path to create a better life for yourself and for your family, for your loved ones. So when you get it out the mud, when you get out this grave, you have to go to another grave and you have to pour resources into their grave and help them get out of there. And then that person has to do the same thing. That is how we raise the dead. You see, a lot of people ain't really living. They're just zombies walking amongst us. And it's very sad. It's heartbreaking if we're going to keep it real. Everybody don't need to be an entrepreneur, no, but everybody deserves to live. You have to live. Don't just exist. Don't just go through this mundane life and accept what racism and capitalism fed you. Don't accept that, because it's not true. Racism told you that you don't belong here. Racism told you that black people aren't smart. Racism told you that black people can't do X, Y, and Z and can't be educated. But we continue to prove those lies wrong. Capitalism told you that because you're not born into a certain tax bracket, that you don't belong in this boardroom or you don't belong at this school. Stop believing the lies. Don't continue to remain in that grave as they continue to dump dirt on you, and then eventually you're buried. Claw, fight, scratch, and climb out of that grave. And then pour your resources and your encouragement into someone else so they can get out of theirs. If this podcast has benefited you in any way, shape, or form, ladies and gentlemen, I ask for two things as always. Number one, please leave a 5-star review. And number 2, pass it on to a friend who may benefit from it as well. So let's continue to work. Let's continue to imagine reality. And let's raise the dead. And let's continue to live and thrive. Have a great day, everyone. I'll talk to you next week.